Hello and welcome to another video. In this video we're going to be talking a little bit about one of my favorite forest school activities, which is making elder beads like these. I find it a fantastic activity working with children. It starts to introduce tool use, and you can tailor it massively to the age, ability and skill level of children, right the way from little ones that can just about use a hacksaw all the way up to children that are looking to use more complex carving techniques. But if that sounds terribly and massively confusing, or it's not something you've done before, keep watching and I'll tell you everything you need to know. So your first step is going to be to find an elder tree. So you're typically going to be looking in woodlands and on the edge of parklands. So any kind of densely wooded area, you will typically see elder. It's pretty easy to identify. So we have the pinnate leaves. So they come off in pairs with another one on the tip. So this is one entire leaf made up of several leaflets. You can see that it's green right from the end there, and then we've got leaves. They aren't as sharply toothed as rowan, and they are slightly different size to ash, but the real way to tell, if I snap off a piece here, is the bark. Bark is very distinctive with those kind of warty knobbles on it, and it will tend to grow over in a spreading kind of arc. So there'll be some shoots that go straight up, like the ones at the back here, but then you'll also have ones just falling over. And of course, at the times when you have either the berries or the flowers themselves on the trees, it's a pretty easy tree to identify. And the real advantage with elder is, of course, if I can get zoomed in, it has a pith in the center, so the really soft pith that can then be hollowed out, and then you can make beads out of that. So what we're looking for is an elder with some nice vertical shoots, ones that are really long and straight, and we typically want them more woody. So we don't want the green ends because those will be too soft for the carving we're looking to do. Looking for a well-established couple of shoots. So if I come in here, take this out, you can pour something like that, and that's perfect. Might even go for something that's been around a little bit longer. If you can get second year growth, it's typically better. See, right at the end it goes quite thin and green, so you want a good thickness to it, a good diameter, at least a finger thickness on this one. So we've got about a finger's thickness to it, and that's nice. The thicker you get it, the more you have to work with. So when we're working with more of the finer carving, then you'll want a thicker stem. If all you're looking to do is just take the bark off, then you can typically go with something that's a bit thinner. I'm going to take it off there. You'll gather as many stems as we then need. So to start off with then, starting the process, we are going to take the elder we've harvested, and we're just going to cut it into decent sized lengths. Basically, you want enough elder in each section to give the children something to hold on to properly, so when they're using a knife they're not necessarily working really close to their hands. The important things to think about as the children are cutting the elder to length is what sort of surface are they going to be resting on. A sawhorse is ideal. If you can get a sawhorse over to site or make one, then it's really handy because you can have it up at a better height, and you can set up the supports in such a way that their hands are protected. They can always stay one side of the supports and use the other side for sawing. But yes, if you're working on a lower surface or you don't have a sawhorse or something, you can also put a pole in next to the stump just to give them something to remind them, the children, that they're going to be cutting on one side of the pole and not the other. So the saw always stays on a different side of your pole from your hands. This just avoids the saw jumping about and potentially landing on their helping hand, as we call it, the hand that's holding on to the wood. But yeah, either a hot crossed hand grip like this with a folding saw, or if they're slightly older and taller, you can get them to anchor it with one foot, and then they can use the saw from there. Yes, you want a couple of length. You want every child to have a good long length of wood. If you have multiple sawhorses going, multiple saws and sawhorses going, they'll really free up what could potentially be a bit of a bottleneck. Let's go close the saw up. Now, as I said earlier, there are various different levels of elder beads, or different difficulties to elder beads. So at a very basic level, you can just get them to use something like a little hacksaw like this, and just choose a length of a couple of centimeters, and then they can just cut the beads to size. Because these hacksaws have such fine, small teeth, it really reduces the risk and the severity of any injuries. So they're a really good tool to use with much younger children, and it gets them working, gets them developing those muscles that they'll need for the work later on. And just like that, you already have a couple of small beads. Now, there's several different ways that you can remove the pith from the center. So one of the most common ones you'll hear about is using a tent stake like this. And you simply just poke it through again, which works okay for these smaller pieces. And because the tent stakes are blunt at one end, the relative risk is pretty low of going through into their hand. So they're just pushing out all of the pith, so all of the white stuff from the inside. See there, if I can get it to focus. Now I'm just taking away all of the inside there. Focus on that, there we go. See, so all of the white bits around the edge, just pushing those through with the tent stake. Another way to do it is to use a palm drill. It goes through really easily. Just give it a bit of a twist, pull it back. Again, if you get one that has more of a metal style head, doesn't have a sharp point to it, it's relatively difficult to injure yourself properly with that. Third option, and actually my favorite, is to use a coach screw. something with a bit of a head, and then you can put it in. The nice part about that is that the screw edges where it screws in, the thread on there almost kind of acts like a bit of a saw and just really helps you pull some of those fibers out from the center. Obviously, because they're a bit sharper at the end, there's a bit more of a hazard that you'd put it straight through into your hand, but it's all about managing risk. Work with whatever is comfortable with you. If you'd like to use the coach screws and then just file down the end so that they're blunt, that would probably be the best of both worlds. Yep, so you can tell that was quite a large diameter elder bead, and then you can get some string or wool or something else, and you can get them to thread the beads onto there like that. And at its simplest level, that is an elder bead. That's you can do with virtually any age group. Really simple. And you can even, as we saw with the elder bead necklace I made there, you can get some acorns and conkers, particularly at this time of year in autumn. Drill some holes in it, and then you can space it out. You can create your elder beads, and you can space them out with acorns and conkers or horse chestnuts. But let's say we want to start introducing some knife skills. So what we can do is take our same long piece of elder, and at the simplest level we can just take off the bark, and that'll create a slightly fancier bead. Now if we want to go a step further than that, what we can do is if we just bite in a little bit more and work on one side, then work at 90 degrees to that same side, and then we switch it over and we go run parallel. We can basically start carving a square profile to the bead. So if I just work on the end here, so you're just moving at 90 degrees. If you're still nervous about introducing knife skills to children, I have a whole different video on that. It's really simple. Just keep the knife moving away from you. So, yep. Difficult to judge. As you can see, there, started to create a slightly more square profile. So you can go for square, hexagonal, basically any sort of shape. You can round off the edges again, so you just reduce it in diameter, take the edges off and see if you can get a perfectly round bead out of it. But that just takes it from just stripping the bark off all the way through to being a bit more purposeful. Now with the making of these beads and the ones that I'll be showing you in a moment, it really is helpful to, well, it's probably necessary to do the carving first and then cut them into beads, into individual beads, because otherwise they just get too small and fiddly, the pith is more likely to break. It's just a whole lot easier if you keep it all intact in one piece before you work with anything smaller. So what if we're then looking to extend it even further to older children, possibly teenagers, adults, we can start looking at other skills. Okay, so I've got my elder here. Let's say I want to create a round bead. What I'd do is I'd put in a bit of a stop cut at the end there, and then I just work towards it. So stop cut all the way around. You go around like that. And then I'm just going to carve up towards that stop cut. You can tell I've done it a bit hastily, not quite stopping at that cut. You can see the advantage of keeping it all together in one piece. This would be a nightmare to carve if it was only a couple of centimeters long. Yeah, so we've started narrowing it down at one edge there, and then we can create a stop cut a couple of centimeters in the other direction. And this is where we want to have left a little bit to hold on to, at least on this side. Let's go roll it. Right, you don't want to get too overzealous with the stop cuts because there's thin walls on some of this elder. If you go too far in, you'll just cut straight through to the pith in the center, and then that will be pretty much it. But you can see it's starting to take shape now because I'm coming in the opposite direction. I'm creating a sort of ovoid shape here. The more you leave at this end, at the other end, the easier it is. You can tell I'm working in quite close quarters there. So you'll maybe tell your learners to maybe start their beads halfway down the piece of elder, or teach them a kind of assisted lever grip like this, just using my fingers on the back of my other hand, just pulling towards me. It's obviously a much more advanced technique than our normal push and thumb cuts, but one that's really well controlled. Yeah, so you can see just starting to get, or hoping you can see, just starting to get a bit more of a curve to the outline. So I've carved in this direction, I've carved in that direction. If I bring it right up camera, you can see it's starting to take a bit of shape, and I can keep working that. So that's a round. What we can also do, we can also create spirals. The spiral cut, you're going to start with the knife at an angle stop cut, and then you just roll it the same way. See, it moves down the piece of elder in a spiral. And then with a careful controlled thumb push, we can just, just deepen this stop cut. So with a careful controlled thumb push, we can just come in this point, and we're starting to carve a spiral pattern in. There we go, coming back up here. You can see just got a little spiral shelf approaching there. Now I can swap it around, and I can come into that same stop cut from the other direction. And it's like I'm creating a little valley that's twisting its way around wood. When we talk about carving, once you've, basically it's all some essence, small controlled thumb cuts for all of the fine carving. You might switch around a little bit, but in most cases it's just cut. There you go. So if we made that a little bit smaller, we could then get a good nice spiral bead out of it. and we can create hexagonal beads, we can create ones that look like cones. My advice would be just teach them how to make a rounded elder bead, teach them how to carve a spiral, and then just leave the rest up to their imagination. I'm sure they'll come up with something, design that neither of us have thought of. And then when it comes to the point where you're going to want to take the beads off, all you do is cut down it either with a really fine tooth saw like the Silky with the fine blade, or get the hacksaws out and cut, and then you can remove the pith from that and you have another little bead. You can string those onto there, and really the possibilities are endless. So there you have it. Whole primer on elder beads. Have a go, have some fun yourself, make yourself a really cool little necklace. Hey, just before you go, just wanted to let you know that if you're looking for more forest school activity ideas, I've actually compiled a list of my top 20 favorite forest school activities. I've got them all in a handy PDF, free to download. I'll leave a link in the description below. It has all of my favorite said activities that I've kind of developed over the years, running from session ideas for ropes and knots, got stuff for fires and fire lighting, got my favorite, all-time favorite cooking recipes like apple crumble and popcorn and making banana boats and that kind of stuff. So it's all together in one handy little document that you can print out and use for ideas. I know how difficult it is to find really good ideas for activities that really push learning forward. So I've just developed this for you. As I said, totally free. Just drop your email. I'll leave a link to everything down below if you want to check that out. Thanks.